and we are only 13% of the population. So the risk is children, pregnant mothers, and students all becoming homeless, all having to face leaving Skagit County, leaving Washington, and leaving even our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Um, Thank you all for such powerful and enlightening responses. Tonette, I want to come back to you real quickly. Thank you for sharing about how the Housing and Essential Needs Program has been important to you. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about why it was so important to you.
Thank you. The reason housing essential needs is important to me is because I have a place that I can call home. It's mine. I have a place where I'm able to stay safe at home during this pandemic, COVID 19. Um, yeah, that's the reason.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really just want to, again, also say thank you to Jennifer, Katie, and Tonette for sharing your stories and allowing the world to hear about your experiences. Thank you so much. We are going to move on to our second question. And this question is being posed to Katie, Jennifer, and Terry. We know that COVID 19 has re exposed many racial inequities in various systems, including housing, and especially considering the role that having a home, a place in our home and our health outcomes during this time. Here's some data. Latinx, Black, Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders are all disproportionately testing positive for coronavirus in Washington. In Washington, 44% of all cases are among Hispanic or Latinx people, while their overall representation in the population is 13%. In Skagit County, 60% of the cases are among Hispanic and Latino people, while they are roughly 18% of the overall population. So 60% of the cases, 18% of the population. American Indian or Alaska Native people and Black people are hospitalized for COVID 19 at 5 times the rate of white people. Hispanic or Latino people are hospitalized at 4 times the rate of white people. What should lawmakers be thinking about in this regard as the state continues to respond to dual crises of COVID 19 and homelessness? So we will begin with Katie and then Jennifer and then Terry.
Thank you. So I'm asking you to listen to us. In March, I asked for masks and I got them 3 months later. And look at where we are. I don't want the same to happen with housing. So please listen to us. When I worked in housing, specifically, we did a research project and we learned through our own eviction history. We had been evicting Black households at a higher rate than white households, even though they were only a small percentage of the population that we were serving. Why is that? We were asking ourselves, how did we fail? How did we play into the system? Often I've seen people receive the 3-day notice to pay or vacate, and people assume that that's a straight eviction and they have to leave their home. When the reality is, there are ways to support them, and there are ways to prevent an eviction to happen, but people aren't aware of that. During COVID, And in the last couple months, I've seen students and their families leave Skagit County. I've seen them leave Washington and leave the country as a whole. This makes me so worried. You have to understand, we don't qualify for unemployment. We didn't get a stimulus check. And because of public charge, we are afraid to apply for government assistance. So where does that leave us? As Latinos, we care for our families. We try to support each other and we depend on each other. So when we don't have a home and we don't have a place to ask for rental assistance, we decide to gather with our people and we join in crowded housing. We find a place that has a roof over our head. And if that's not here in our own home, in our own county, in our own state, then that's back with whatever relatives we might have in either Mexico or Venezuela or anywhere else. So what I'm asking is to keep us in mind during this decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. That was very poignant that you are asking to be listened to. And if I may, I would just like to add to that, that we take action on what we hear. Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Katie, for sharing that. It's critical that lawmakers understand that if we're going to actually fix these problems, you need to listen to the people whose these laws are going to greatly impact. Many people don't realize, but urban Indians make up about 71% of the Native Americans here in Washington state. So being urban Indian means we don't have a formal territory because we have been relocated due to the federal treaties that became the supreme law of the land back in the 1800s. My family particularly was pushed out of Alaska due to World War II, and it was that has caused a lot of intergenerational trauma and had set us up for many years of poverty and homelessness and instability. In our culture, we support each other in a community, and unfortunately in the westernized culture, we believe that everybody's problems are their own, but it's going to take the entire community to solve these problems. It's not going to be just any one person, but it's going to take all of us. And when you have these states like Washington, California, Alaska, all of these states that have some of the highest urban Indians, we're stuck between state and federal regulations. Much of the help that I needed to become housed and stabilized meant that I would have to go and live on the original territory in Alaska. But I was born here in Washington. The other parts are that we are already on the highest statistics of missing and murdered. We have the highest suicide rates. We are 7 times more likely to be homeless. My earliest time being homeless was when I was 9 years old, and I didn't gain stable housing, consistent housing without worry of pay or vacates until I was about 20, 28, 29, and that was through the housing program. So when you're talking about the amount of homelessness and issues that we have in our state, and then you add this pandemic to it, there are many people who were probably not at risk of becoming homeless, but now they are. And many of these people are your constituents and the people that are going to be voting for you coming into this next election. And so what are your constituents going to think and see if you're going to cut the very programs that are going to be needed for them down the road? Because as the science has explained to us, there is still a second wave to come. And speaking from experience here in Snohomish County, A lot of people don't want to follow the science here. And that just means we're going to have further delays of a stable economy. And one of the quotes, or one of the statistics that I learned from the governor's poverty reduction work group was when you're looking at childhood poverty, like who I was as a young child, for every dollar that you can put in to prevent childhood poverty is going to yield a $7 return to the economy, which is huge. So when you're looking at the cuts, it's easy for people to say, well, let's cut food stamps. I've had more food stamps during this pandemic than I've ever had before. So it has taken me almost 3 months to get a month's worth of supply of food in my home. And many of us who are struggling like that, if we end up on the street, we're being given a death sentence. So not to say homes aren't essential, that means everybody who is brown and black and vulnerable, you're giving them a death sentence in this pandemic. And something like that will not go unseen. It will not go unchecked. And people are gathering, people are organizing. So it's going to be critical for our lawmakers to protect the most vulnerable people in these situations, because we do outnumber you and we do know how to organize. So I just say, think of your own families and the people and your friends, because they are all at risk of becoming homeless now. And when you become homeless, you're that much closer to contracting COVID. But that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. That was very, very good. I just really want to say snap, snap, thank you. And then Terry.
Well, speaking from Eastern Washington, where people of color are often invisibilized and people think that Spokane is just a white city, we really aren't. Eastern Washington is very diverse. It's just that we aren't diverse when it comes to being in positions of power. So I can talk about Spokane, but I will also refer to the other Eastern Washington counties, Yakima County, Benton County, Franklin County, which are booming with coronavirus right now. We are now we are the numbers that are spiking the state of Washington, and and the invisibility makes it like people don't even notice it. So in Spokane, our Marshallese community makes up 1% of the population of the city, but they are 25% of all of the positive COVID cases in Spokane. And that is a community that was suffering from challenges to housing security even before this pandemic hit. And many of those families have language barriers, cultural barriers, that have been, they've been suffering from those for a very long time. Many households have already been doubled up, tripled up, which probably contributes to crowded housing conditions, multi-generational families. 3 generations living in a household is not uncommon. Which then elevates the risk of those with compromised conditions becoming deadly when those viruses are contracted. So we're just seeing that, and those are also the very same communities that are either considered essential workers and must work in Eastern Washington culture that up until day before yesterday, really virtually nobody was wearing any masks. And so people working in the essential works, or they are being laid off from work because they're not in the kind of work where they have the opportunity to work from home. So Spokane is one of the top 23 cities in the nation that has the highest number of job loss due to COVID-19, combined with the highest number of households experiencing that are rent burdened households. So when you put those two together, and the ending of the unemployment benefits that really I think right now is pretty much floating our economy. We have a very weak economy in Eastern Washington as well, and so when the money ends for people getting unemployment, it isn't just going to affect the people that get unemployment. It that their spending will stop, and so our economy is downward bound, and that will just mean more job loss, and for exactly the very same impacted communities, which are our communities of color. In Spokane, minimum wage is about as high as you will ever get for entry level or for any kind of service work, because we border the state of Idaho, and the state of Idaho minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. So, you know, they're coming across the border. And so that again puts people of color even at more in positions where they are not even getting that employment. So the racial equity, I think, in Spokane is very pronounced. It was in our analysis for impediments for fair housing, the lack, the disparity in home ownership, and the fact that we have no tenant protections is identified as an
Mhm,
impediment to fair housing.
mhm.
So we were hurting before, and this COVID is just now making it worse. And thank you for the speakers before me. You were so much more eloquent than I am. But I do agree that evicting people at this time means that people who are testing positive in Eastern Washington will be displaced and without a home. And I think that puts everybody at risk in Eastern Washington.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Terry. You know, a couple of just takeaways from everything that I've heard. We all benefit from the labor of migrant farm workers, unless we have divested 100% from going to the grocery store. There are so many things that people don't realize that migrant farm workers are the ones that are putting those things on our table. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. And it's very difficult when you consider the conditions that migrant farm workers live in and work under. And that takes me to my other point, which is that the CDC has already recognized this, that folks who are living in densely populated areas, whether it's, you know, a household, it is a neighborhood, it's a city, they're at higher risk for contracting COVID-19. And that's typically where people of color tend to be more likely to be. And this is, so we can also just extrapolate from that what the impacts are for those folks who are, again, migrant farm workers, folks who are experiencing homelessness and are unsheltered. There's definitely an intersection there, creating a greater risk of contracting COVID-19. We're going to go on to our next question, and we have just a few minutes for this question. And that is, we know that it's very important to stay home in order to stay healthy right now. And we also know that more and more and more people are unable to pay their rent. That makes them at risk, more at risk for losing their home. Um, there's some interesting data there. Communities of color were disproportionately unable to pay their rent in June. 30% of Black households, 11% of Hispanic or Latino households, 10% of Asian households were unable to pay their rent in June, compared to 4% of white households. Black renters are 6 times as likely as white renters to have missed June rent. So to real quickly, just 2 minutes, Terry, Katie, and Jennifer, in your perspective, what should lawmakers be doing to keep people in their homes right now, and especially when or if the moratorium ends? So real quick, Terry, Katie, and Jennifer. Jennifer.
Well, again, I'm speaking in Eastern Washington, where we're really having challenges of getting any local funding for rental assistance. So if there are state lawmakers listening, we are definitely being impacted by this further because unfortunately, this whole pandemic has been made political, which it shouldn't be. It's a public health issue. Unfortunately, even when it comes to allocating funds that Congress had set for our Eastern Washington communities, they are not necessarily going to the renters in order to stay in their homes. Without an extension of the moratorium, we are going to be, evicted, and the again, lack without rental assistance, rent doesn't get paid. We like I said, we're already at a weak economy. This increases the chances that landlords aren't going to be able to pay their property taxes, which is then going to further deteriorate our county and cities budgets, and we may experience more layoffs. And the tenants union in Spokane, we've actually been working with the landlord association to try to convince our area lawmakers to not consider this a political issue, and that rental assistance could make the difference between us experiencing a recession or this becoming a depression. The economic downfall when rent isn't paid and people can't go back to work. We really need some help to keep housing stable, people in their homes, um, and protections for tenants so that when the rent is paid, unfortunately, our concern is that landlords would just take the rent. And then because we have so few rental tenant protections, a tenant could literally get a 20-day notice and be given a notice that their rental is terminated after a landlord has received any back rent. So in addition to rental assistance, we need tenant protections so that tenants are protected even if the rent gets paid.
Thank
And
you.
that would be the top.
Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer.
Yes. Well, I know that the lawmakers are going to have to make cuts. And if they decide that they think housing is not essential, they're going to be cutting the most critical programs that we have in our state to keep people stable. Without a safe home, if we have more people who are homeless and that are in the community, and these people we don't have access to places to social distance or to be able to, if we become sick and we end up on the street, we are going to be more exposing the illness to other communities because we'll still have to use public bathrooms. We'll still have to use laundromats. We're going to have to use the community to be able to help us quarantine. And if our second wave is coming, it's not if, but when this second wave is coming, and you have people who used to be able to pay the rent, but now they're getting evicted, they're going to have something on their record that's going to make it nearly impossible for them to get into a new apartment, because having an eviction on your record is like having a criminal record. You can't get people to rent to you. It'll cost you 2 or 3 times as much to get moved. And if you're already poor, you don't have that kind of money. My example being, I needed to move. I didn't have an eviction, but I had bad credit. And it was nearly $3,000 for me to move just in February before the pandemic hit. So you're talking about the last thing they need to be doing is cutting any programs that are going to support people in their homes, that are going to doing everything we can to prevent them from having to be on the street, because I can guarantee you that if we have more homeless people out there who end up contracting COVID, everybody's going to get COVID. And there isn't anything you're going to be able to do to stop that except to make sure that each person has their own space and their own way of being able to keep themselves away from others so we don't get sick. And a lot of us that are Black and brown, we already have poor health care as it is. Many of us didn't get insurance until Obamacare. I didn't get good health insurance until Obamacare kicked in. So some may say, well, you have Indian Health, but if you know anything about going to the reservation or to Seattle Indian Health Board, the federal government earlier this year sent the Indian Health Board a bunch of body bags instead of COVID tests. So the federal government is in charge of our healthcare, and the last thing they want is healthy natives. So it's going to be up to the state. Like I was saying earlier on, there is a large portion of urban Indians, and unless we were on our own reservations, we could close those borders down and we could contain and do what we could to protect ourselves. But many of us are out there without protection. And my sister is a recipient of the HEN program, and she is still trying to find a place, but she has severe health issues, and I know, like other people who are on these programs, they need these programs. These are lifelines. And, you know, a lot of these lawmakers, maybe you need to consider other ways to bring in revenue besides making cuts. You know, what about a pay cut for yourself? You know, I know our governor makes quite a bit of money. Everybody else in our city councils, everything, we need to talk about sharing the burden and not placing all of that burden on us, the most poor, the most vulnerable people in this nation, in this state. We need to start looking at these people that are having the money, the people that have the power, and we need to figure out, how are you going to give that power back to the people? Because if you don't give it, we're going to take it. And that's going to be the end of that. But like I said, don't make cuts to our programs because I can assure you, you won't be elected in the next cycle, because our people are watching, we're listening, and people are becoming informed. And so I'm hoping that you recognize that we're human beings, that we deserve a place to live. We deserve a safe place. We deserve rights, protection. Everything that you have, we deserve just as much. Just wait, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Ooh, Katie, we are we're running a little bit behind. It is so important though to listen to everyone, and so thank you, Katie. What would you like to add to what's been said already?
Yes, so I just want to point out that to quarantine in an apartment is difficult. And to have to quarantine in a migrant camp, which is 1 bedroom, 6 to 7 people, that's impossible, okay? And so what I'm asking for is to take a look at what's going on right now. We saw an increase of people going to the food bank. Right now there's 2,000 families going every single Saturday, where it used to be 200. My guess is if they're struggling to get food on their table, they might be struggling with rent. So this is what I'm talking about here in Skagit County alone. And so I have some asks, and my asks are, take a look at the situation that happened with the masks when I asked for them and we were late by 3 months. Okay, so I really believe in prevention. Let's prevent all this homelessness that could happen in our state. And so I asked for some actions now. And the actions that I'm going to ask for are eviction prevention. I've already heard landlords say that in August, they will be issuing them because they need to pay their own bills. So I'm going to say that again. We need eviction prevention, especially for people that have fallen behind 3 months or more on their rent. We need more rental assistance to keep people housed. We need less restrictions to qualify for these programs, and less restrictions to qualify for housing as well. Because for a farm worker to have to verify by a third party in order to get into housing, it's really difficult to do. And the last thing that I ask is that we need more workforce and mixed income housing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katie, Jennifer, Tonette, especially to Terry and Hannah as well, for your participation and your valuable stories. I am going to now turn the floor over to Kiki, who is going to take us through the next part of our conversation.
Hey everyone, I just want to echo Pam and saying thank you so much to the panelists and Pam, you as well. The wisdom, the expertise, and the stories, and just your presence here today has been really inspiring and a really important reminder for us during these times. So we are running a few minutes behind, but I'm gonna actually ask our audience to participate. And so I'm gonna share my screen and show you exactly what I mean by that. So 1 second. All right. Okay, so now it's your turn. We too want to hear your story. How is COVID-19 impacting your family, your home? We're currently collecting video testimonies that are about 20 to 90 seconds long, so not super long, on this topic. And we would love to hear from all folks who are in Washington and have something to say about this topic. So how can you take action? You want to put the link that you see on your screen into your browser or onto your smartphone. It's just bit.ly/my story of home. Each word in my story of home, the first letter is capitalized. And I'll just read that out. It's bit.ly/ capital M, Y, capital S, TORY, capital O, V, capital HOME. During COVID-19, it's really important, and I would say always, for us to be getting creative about how we're making sure our lawmakers, elected officials, and the public are hearing our voices. And so this is one way, but we want to democratize that process, and we'd love to hear from you. This is, once you put that link into your browser, it's going to take you to a page that looks like this with some prompts. You can record directly on here or upload a video from your phone. We'd love to make sure we get lots of video. And I also, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to email me at kikis@wliha.org. And with that, we are actually coming to the wrap up portion of our day. I did put this in the chat, but I want to shout out, thank you, Michelle, for putting that in the chat. Also, the full list of lawmakers who are attending today. We have Senator Saldana, Representative Farringer, Representative Tai, Representative Ryu, Senator Kuderer, Representative Macri, Representative Morgan, and Representative Rommel, and Representative Lenkenoff. So with that, we did ask 4 of you to share a few final thoughts with the panelists and the folks viewing. And so with that, hopefully you all should now be in the panelist view and able to show your videos. We encourage everyone to share your face. And then if you are one of the folks who we asked to speak, we want to make sure that you are unmuted as well. All right, and with that, I will go ahead and just call out in the order from which I see. So let's start with Representative Mi Lin Tai, please.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I think I put it in the chat that the panelists, you have shared with us your personal experience and you really speak from your heart. And it touched me in a way that I cannot really describe. And so I appreciate your sharing with us. And I myself, with many of the lawmakers in this space, take your stories to our heart. We know that we are working really hard to make sure that our policy reflects your needs and your stories. We also need your help. We need your help to do this work with us, because without you, we are not able to do our job alone in this system. And as you share with your lived experience, this is a system built to benefit a few and not all of us. And in order for us to really being able to change that system to its roots, we need to hold hand and work together. I again thank you, and I look forward to keep working with you and having your support when we come back to Olympia.
Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it to Representative Cindy Ryu.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this awesome session. I really loved hearing from your voices. Definitely listening well is one of the skill sets that we need to develop even better. Definitely agree that homes are essential. And as you all know, Housing First has been the recognition of priority for all of us, at least those of us attending here, as well as our colleagues in the Democratic Caucus. And literally increasing displacement, that is very expensive to the state. And of course, very disruptive as well as expensive to the tenants themselves. And so definitely seeking emergency funding and direct rent assistance, keeping people housed as long as possible and stable. And then, of course, for the long-term funding on housing, we must look at more progressive new revenues, but that won't help us during this COVID response and emergency. Definitely tenant protection, increase of tenant protection, and I have some ideas about how we can do that without impacting the small mom and pops who literally depend on their income to pay for their own living expenses. And a lot of room for us to increase and improve practices connecting services real time. And so Snohomish County's Volunteers of America, Western Washington, is talking with Representative Macri on improving that. And of course, increasing the access and expanding the use of existing local revenue, for instance, for workforce housing and the definition of that. So lots of work to be done. Thank you also very much for your hard work and your educating us. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And I'll just make a clarification. We're also going to be hearing from Senator Kuderer, Senator Saldana, and Representative Rommel coming up. I do want to note the time. So if you have to hop off, we totally understand, but we hope that you're able to stay and listen / share your final thoughts. So if you are able to stay, I'm hoping that Senator Saldana will be able to go next.
Evening, and thank you for sharing. I think there's a couple of things that that I resonated in particular with when Terry made the case that Eastern Washington or rural communities are diverse, and the number of the Marshallese community being at 1%, but over 25% of the cases really struck that, and that where the diversity is not is in the positions of power. And I think that is so important why you're telling your stories, and why that needs to change over time, and how we help support and making sure that those that are impacted are at the decision-making tables with us to influence it. So I just want to thank you for your leadership. And I think that right now, what's important as I'm thinking through is how we advocate with you with the governor's office because the legislature is not in session, and so our power is more informal at this moment, and more as advocates, that because we're not going to be in session in the short term, as a lot of the executive orders are getting close to expiring again. We need four-corner agreements to be able to make those decisions. And then we have more flexibility and ability to help influence and shape what a comprehensive approach to the COVID dollars and the CARES Act money, where that should go. And so the more that we're hearing directly from you, and I think the other piece that I'll say is there's a group of us that are working around farm worker and undocumented priorities. And so just to let you know, my office is trying to take the lead in trying to figure out what is our ask, how do we demand more from our agencies and the governor right now to be able to be more responsive, so we don't have 3 months go by before PPE is there, and we know that harvest is right now, and that what we have set up for housing, both for just general housing, is something that needs to be tackled. So how we think about our rural housing and how that relates to farm worker housing is something that is very much on my mind. It's been 20 years since we even addressed it in a holistic way, and it's time for us to come back and show leadership in that space. And I think that the table here and the folks that we heard from are going to be critical voices in helping shape what that looks like. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Senator Couture, would you go next, please?
Sure, thank you. I want to thank the panelists very much for your stories. You provided us with some lived experiences that we do need to be reminded of day in and day out, because what we do affects people directly. And I chair the Housing Stability and Affordability Committee in the Senate, and we created that committee 2 years ago to focus on housing. And it was something that I believe Katie said about the intersectionality between healthcare and housing. And it's so true. Quite frankly, housing is healthcare. We know that when someone has a roof over their head, that they're more likely to be healthier. So it is something that we are looking at very strongly. We have made strides in the last couple of years. We changed the eviction notice laws from 3 days to 14 days and added judicial discretion last year. And that, we know that's not enough, but it was a good start. And we know that there's more to do. We know that the emergency rental assistance is going to be essential, but we also know we're not going to have enough money. And we need to have the federal government as a partner and not an opponent in this. And that is something where we need grassroots folks like yourselves to get very active in making sure that this issue is front and center with our congressional delegation. And they are, quite frankly, on top of it. We need to make sure that they're waving that issue in front of their colleagues day in and day out as well. So we know we have more work to do. I've been working very closely with Rep. Macri in particular, and we are working on legislation for renter protections for next year. And we look forward to working with all of you and collaborating with all of you, and would love your feedback once we get this finalized. I'd love your feedback on it, so that we make sure that what we're passing aren't just words on paper, but actually will make an impact on people's lives. So thank you again. I really look forward to working with you all in Olympia, and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. And finally, we'd like to invite Representative Rommel.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity to wrap up here. And I really want to echo my colleagues in expressing gratitude for the panelists and in sharing your stories, and for all of your advocacy. What you had to say today is powerful, and it's important, and it's impactful. I will follow your lead and share my own story, which is the reason that I'm here, able to be an advocate for housing as a state representative, is because 15 years ago I was a single dad, and my son and I were able to benefit from a program through Colshan Community Land Trust. And the home that we got there became the foundation for the stability that we've built our life on since then. And I'm here because everyone deserves that opportunity. I really appreciated what Terry had to say, sort of summarizing our situation, which is that that this health crisis has revealed the urgency and disparity of our housing problems. And I really wanted to appreciate what Tonette and Terry and Hannah brought, especially emphasizing the importance of the HEN program, housing and essential needs, and rental assistance. From where I sit, that's some of the smartest money we spend in Washington State. Preventing homelessness, preventing that problem it's difficult to find something we could spend money on that would do more good in our communities. And to that extent, about 40 legislators joined together a couple of weeks ago in signing on asking for the governor's office to prioritize rental assistance. And last week we did hear back that they're investing $100 million from the CARES Act funding. And as Katie noted, the COVID's disparities are particularly challenging for and particularly unfair for folks who are undocumented. And so one of the things that we emphasized in asking for that rental assistance funding is that a third of that money be set aside to support communities of color, allocated through agencies led by and for communities of color, because rental assistance is one kind of support that we are able to offer undocumented folks that doesn't come with those unjust federal strings. I think we all know that $100 million isn't enough. And if we didn't know it at the beginning of this call, we'd absolutely hear it clearly now. It's a step in the right direction. And the other challenge that we're facing is just the time limitedness of those funds. The CARES Act funds need to be spent by October 31st. As was noted numerous times, we're not going to be through this this coming fall. So there's a lot more to do, and I just want you all to know that I hear you, and that I think we all hear you. Your advocacy is important, and I hope you keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I said that Representative Rommel would be last, but there's so much excitement on this line. I'd like to open it up, and let's see, Representative Morgan, would you, or other folks too, but let's start with Representative Morgan. If you have other thoughts, we'd love to hear as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you to all the panelists who spoke. As I share a lot of your stories, I might be the only legislator serving right now who has actually walked in your shoes, that I have actually been homeless. Matter of fact, I served in my first session as a couch surfer. So as I was advocating for bills in regards to the homeless crises, I myself did not have my own house key in my pocket. So trust me, I know exactly what shoes you're walking in, and you can best believe that I am going to continue to advocate wholeheartedly in ensuring that we get a handle on this. I mean, I'm still fighting here in my own community when COVID, when the stay home orders first began, contacting my local government, what about the homeless? I still haven't gotten an answer. So that's very concerning. So we have to remember that as we are fighting to put laws into place for all of us, that we still have to collaborate in partnership with local jurisdictions as well. And that's where your advocacy really plays a great part, is as you're advocating with us today that you would continue that advocacy on the street, because that's really where it matters, because they're the ones who handle the purse strings. We write the law and say, give it, but they're the ones who have the purse strings, and they're the ones that we need to make sure that we are still on their doorstep. I held a Section 8 voucher. I held a food stamp card, yet and still, I was still homeless with my four children. How does this happen to a veteran? You know, and I was a school board member at the time. So I get it, and know that we all hear you this evening, that COVID is no joke. And I know that I'm getting, my voice is getting tired with saying again from the mountaintop that these disparities that are here, we have got to do something. But I will tell you this, I know that from talking with my caucus and my colleagues that we are serious about this, you know, and even with the Senate chamber having equity conversations, we mean business, and writing letters to the governor. We're here with you. We stand with you in solidarity. So please keep your heads up and try and stay safe as much as you can, because we have a long fight against us. We are only just opening the door. We opened the door in 2018 by getting 16 members of color to now say that I not only I never was privileged, but I actually lived the life. So who better to advocate and bring laws into place than the person who has walked in your shoes? So Beth, we're behind you, and we take our hats off to you. You have a lot of courage to keep standing up, even in the midst of the trouble, in the midst of the storm, that you keep your voice elevated and keep bringing people with you. And I just wanted to say, in terms of people turning in their keys because they get a 3-day notice, I get that, because I remember that 3-day notice and I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. Even though I was a landlord tenant advocate before, I'd never seen this type of 3-day notice come across. It was all about gentrification, right? They just wanted me out so that they could raise the rent. So now we're with this COVID, and you know, and now we can't put people out. That's what I was saying. Please give us hand washing stations, give us something. So hats off to you. Thank you for even allowing me to be in your presence tonight to keep advocating for you. Contact my office if you need anything more that we need to be doing. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much. That is just so inspiring. As someone who's gone through homelessness myself, it just is such a beacon of hope to see people like you and the other folks on this line fighting for our community members and people on the front lines with that perspective. We're already over time, and so I understand if you have to log off, but I'd like to just open it up, or keep opening it up, to see if there are other lawmakers who would like to respond. Now, I know if you had other things on your calendar and stuff, like I said, we totally understand, but we just want to make sure that everyone's thoughts are captured in this meeting. So who, let's see, 1 second. Yeah, Representative Macri, would you like to go?
Sure. Well, that is a tough act to follow. My amazing colleague, Representative Morgan. It's truly an honor to be able to serve alongside her and truly work for housing justice. I want to echo the thanks to this panel. You all are amazing. And I'm really grateful, not only that you shared your stories, but that you're clearly organizing from a position of power, that you understand that the power in organizing and advocating, and you understand that we work for you all, and you are intent on keeping us accountable to that. I think the policy positions you have talked about today, it is essential that we protect people from eviction, and not just every 30 or 60 days as the governor has been extending, but that we make sure that everybody who has gone through this pandemic is protected from eviction. And so I will be working towards that. I know many of my colleagues here are committed to that as well. because the public health emergency requires that people have a home so they can stay home to be healthy. And so I am committed to do that. There's lots of challenges, as you heard, around money, about whether or not the federal government will come through for us. And we know that it will take new revenue to ensure that we can meet the needs. And I know that I am committed to that, and many of us in the Democratic caucus are actively strategizing for how we can raise progressive revenue, make sure that we're not always going back to low income people, working class people, middle income people, and taxing them, but really making sure that we're sharing prosperity in this state so we can keep everyone healthy and safe. So I just want to echo the thanks, tell you, please keep at it. I know you have real and busy lives outside of the advocacy work that you do. So I am just inspired by your generosity in sharing your expertise, in sharing the experiences of your community, and in sharing the details about how the policies that we craft impact you and your communities. So keep at it. I want to also extend a similar offer to reach out to my office anytime to talk about issues around how we can do better in the legislature and make sure that we're designing policies that actually work for real people across this state. So thanks for that opportunity to be here.
This was great. This was wonderful. And I hope you all share in my sentiments that this was definitely time well spent. Again, I want to just issue a thank you to our participants, to our panel, to everyone who shared your very valuable stories. I personally, I can listen to your stories. I can listen to people share their stories because it is a reminder of the richness of our country, the things that really make us a rich and wealthy country. Just know that you are in good company. You are not alone. We all have our stories. We all have gone through something to get to where we are. And I just want to encourage you to keep fighting the good fight. Thank you to all of our elected officials. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for weighing in to be encouraging and to say, this is how we can also help you. To all of the rest of our participants, our attendees, thank you so much for making the time to just sit here and listen to this conversation. And I just want to remind everyone to go to that website, bit.ly/my. Would you put that up? Kiki, I thought I would have it. Charge that to my head and not my heart. But please feel free to go into that site and share your story. That's so important. And again, to everyone, we thank you. And that's it. Have a good night, everybody.